Hello everyone. For this final book review Wednesday that I'll be doing for a while, I've decided to discuss Sense and Sensibility, which is another famous work by Jane Austen, who wrote such novels as Pride and Prejudice, which I reviewed a couple of, I would say it has been a while back. I can't exactly remember when, but it was a while back, and I thought I would look into another one of her works. This is actually the first novel that she wrote, which I find to be interesting because usually a lot of people associate her with Pride and Prejudice, and this actually was the first one to come out. But basically, Sense and Sensibility, I think, approaches the kind of 18th century era in a more interesting way than Pride and Prejudice does. I think there's a lot more family dynamics and more interesting things going on within Sense and Sensibility. There's, I think, a lot more weighted, and I think a lot of the characters have various different aspects to them that they have to deal with, because in particular the main characters, one being Marianne, who sort of stands for sensibility, because she's very sensitive, she's very emotional, she's not the most rational or logical, and Sense being Eleanor, her elder sister, which kind of makes sense when you look at it. But really, it's interesting because during this time period we do have this this movement of romanticism where you base your actions on emotions, and Jane Austen, I think, was trying to sort of say that having both of these aspects can be very powerful and helpful to people, but they can also put a damper on that particular person's life, especially when there is this sense of emotion, and there's also this sense of reason and logic. So she kind of plays around with this concept and has sort of the main character sort of represent those things, and I find that to be really interesting. It's sort of the same with Pride and Prejudice, how I guess Darcy would be Pride and Elizabeth would be Prejudice, but I feel like here there's a lot more going on within the family. You'll see how their father dies in the beginning of the book, and how they have to adjust to a different kind of lifestyle than they had previously. And you kind of see the different characters that they encounter, and you see how both the main characters, Eleanor and Marianne, sort of fall in love, and with various different men, and then how they ultimately, I would say Marianne I guess Marianne is given more of an emphasis on in the book, because there's like two men that like her, and then Eleanor as the one, I guess. But there is this sort of emphasis on putting in romance and putting in sort of the heartbreak too, and I kind of liked how it was trying to sort of counteract with their personality traits. Like, for example, Marianne based her love on just emotion, but not really on rationale, and you'll see how it ends up impacting her in a negative way. And then you see sort of the same with Eleanor, but in reverse, where she's very sensible and logical, and she doesn't go with her emotions, and it kind of puts in a damper on things with her relationship with this particular other character. But I really don't want to give a lot of these characters away because this is a really character-driven film character-driven book, and there's a lot of character interactions, and I kind of don't want to spoil anything for anyone. But I think what you need to know going in is to not think that it's like Pride and Prejudice. I feel that this novel approaches itself a lot differently than Pride and Prejudice does. It takes similar concepts like the title, but I feel like for this one I was a little bit more invested in the surroundings and the characters, and I was more engaged with the concepts that were being brought up, and how ultimately the sisters sort of bond together, and I felt there was just a lot stronger relationships in this story, and I guess I just liked how the setup was I just liked how the setup, to me at least, felt a little bit more interesting than Pride and Prejudice. I felt like with Pride and Prejudice it was kind of predictable, but with this I didn't really predict what was going to happen. It kind of delved into some twists and turns. Like, it's not like shocking what ends up happening, but you do kind of wonder sort of towards when you're getting towards the end of the book, like what's really going to result from all of this drama that ends up happening. And I think Jane Austen likes to set up this kind of drama within her books, and I think this one in particular worked really well because there was a lot more, I think, going on with the characters than just focusing on these two characters who we know are going to get together at the end and who we know don't like each other, and so on and so forth. And with this one, it's more, I feel it's more natural. I think it's just more realistic in how it plays out everything, and how it presents itself. I feel it's a lot more like you can see how that there are characters that are maybe more like Marian, and then you could see characters a little bit more like Eleanor, and I felt like there was more for me to relate to in this story than really Pride and Prejudice. And I know a lot of people that really love Jane Austen will say, no, you're wrong, Pride and Prejudice is the best, and blah blah blah. And you're more than happy to have that opinion, but for me personally, I feel like this one was, when it comes to Jane Austen, I think this one was actually better for me, and just because I felt like it plays out the plot in a more realistic way. It's not predictable, and it's not and it feels more, the characters feel, I think, a little bit more they feel a little bit more representative of the time, and they're still also really relatable, and there's a lot more family dynamics going on, and there's more relationships, I think, going on that make a big impact to the story. So I guess for me, I just feel like that the execution of the plot and of the character relationships was just more interesting to me in this book than it was in Pride and Prejudice. So, I mean, I'm probably alone, but that's okay. But I think that it's definitely worth a read if you like these kinds of stories and like this kind of time period. It's very sophisticated. Again, the Old English kind of might be a little bit too high up there for some people because they talk so suave and so and so intellectual that sometimes you don't feel it's really like down to earth, like how the way we talk nowadays. So it might be hard to follow for some readers, but I think overall, out of the Jane Austen stories that I've read so far, the only one being Pride and Prejudice and being this one, I personally feel that this one is more interesting to me and kept me more engaged, and I didn't feel like I was watching. I mean, even though it kind of gets a little dramatic at times and a little soap opera-y, I feel like for this one it's less it's less it's less pity filled, and it's less dramatic, and it's more like uplifting, kind of go lucky, and the characters kind of make you feel comfortable and welcome, and you don't feel like that there's these characters who are completely judgmental of each other, and you know, there's not really like that same setup with Pride and Prejudice, even though you know the one that you expect the people to end up with is not really what you expect where they end up with. So it is similar to that sense, but I just like the execution so much more better, because it's not like they're bitter to that one particular person. They just don't see that person that way until later on. So it's not like Marianne's completely, you know, bitter to the one person that she ultimately ends up marrying, but you know, she just doesn't see how there could be like a romantic relationship. So I think that plans out more realistically, to be honest, instead of going into the automatic judgment mode. So that's why I think I liked this one better. There was less it just seemed less it just seemed to be less focused in on trying to have a kind of love-hate relationship, and more about like the family and the relationships between the sisters, and sort of their relationships with others that surround them. So I think it just dealt it in itself. I think the novel deals with it in a more interesting way. Let's just say that. It's a lot more interesting, I feel, and it's a lot more realistic compared to Pride and Prejudice, I feel. But that's just my opinion. You can take that for what it's worth, but I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this book. It's very straightforward in that there are these two sisters, sense equaling Eleanor, sensibility equaling Marian, and they go through this kind of a journey with their family because the situation happens where their father dies and they have to move somewhere else. So they are in a different place, and it's really about them and the relationships that they make with other people, and how that sort of affects in turn the family's relationships with each other. So it's, if you like relationships, if you like people talking, then definitely this book's for you. But I think that's really all I can say. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'm more than happy to answer them. But until next time, everybody.